Good evening, everybody. Welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 7 of the Case King Pro Series. We are at the wonderful circuit of Brands Hatch, and my goodness, after such an action-packed week last time around at Mount Panorama, I am expecting and hoping for just as much excitement as action as we had there. What a race we had around the mountain, with Alex Smolyar going all the way from P11 to the front of the grid and taking a dominant victory in the end. He did make one small error, but on a day where so many people had issues trying to get their way through that very technical Australian circuit, he was extremely rapid and extremely consistent for the most part, and that paid dividends in the end, and saw him get a fantastic result upon his return to the championship. And speaking of the championship, when we consider the results of last week's race in the grand scheme of things, right now we have Luke Whitehead, after those adjustments for the mid-season, leading the championship standings. And then when we factor in some of the results of the drop scores, that also starts to play into effect as well. And if we have a look at this rather snazzy looking overlay here, as you can see, so this is the championship standings as of right now, totaling up all of the points, and that sees Luke Whitehead leading George Boothby and then Grantis Korekis in the championship fight. And when we factor in some of these drop scores, like I say, for the most part in this midpoint of the season, it's actually fairly consistent with the top 5 at least, and it starts to shuffle around just a little bit, but the margins are significantly tighter between the likes of Whitehead and George Boothby, only just over a couple of 100 points separating those drivers when taking into account those drop scores. Grantis Korekis less than 150 points behind the likes of George Boothby, and then it is very tightly packed in that fight just outside of those top 3 positions. So some really interesting stuff for these guys as they progress further on into this championship. Of course, they're running out of rounds for those better results to come in and try to fade away from those maybe slightly poorer finishes at those times where they've had issues in the races, or when they've had some misfortune, disconnects the likes of Jade Hutchinson. Remember, he was a championship leader, now finds himself in P5 in the standings, but when we consider the effect of drop scores and how consistent he has been at every other race that's gone his way so far, maybe by the end of the season, we might see that Ferrari start to surge back through the order. So definitely look to keep an eye out for him. And going into round 7 today, I am sure that we're going to have some fantastic action around this circuit. And speaking of which, let's have a bit of a run through of this amazing track. 9 turns of action-packed stuff around this amazing British track through Paddock Hill Bend, turn 1. That's going to be very interesting on the first lap in towards Druids. And then the very tricky turn 3 of Graham Hill Bend, and then work your way down the Cooper Straight before approaching Surtees Corner. This will be very important for a lot of drivers because that can set up a big run as you climb up the hill over Pilgrim's Drop and then start to approach one of the most scary sequence of corners I think you can tackle in a GT3 car into Hawthorne's really quick section here. And then as you start to approach Westfield, then immediately followed up by the likes of Dingledell, the blind apex of Sheen's Curve, down in towards Stirling's, and on the run towards the penultimate corner of Clearways, and then immediately into Clark Curve to round out the lap from there. And I tell you what, this sort of circuit, very much like Bathurst, maybe doesn't quite have the same extreme levels of elevation change as we see at that amazing Mount Panorama circuit, but certainly is going to keep our drivers on their toes and really be a test of their skills. And on top of that, of course, this circuit based in the UK, we may have some British weather to factor into this as well. There's some chance that we could have some rain, some changeable conditions, and that is always going to be a very interesting aspect for these drivers to tackle, because they need to make sure that their car is operating consistently across each of those conditions if they really want to optimize their pace around here. And also look out for the undercut strategies as well. Of course, these drivers do have a pit window that they have to make their compulsory pit stop in, but the undercut, pretty powerful around here because it's fairly high tyre wear. We've got a lot of fast corners, high loads on those tyres to get fresh set of boots on the car, and you are very likely to gain some time, and that could really shuffle some things around, but then bring everything close together near the end. And we already saw earlier on in the season with the likes of George Boothby, Darren McCormack battling and going through different phases of kind of their tyre degradation at Watkins Glen. It was George Boothby that had the advantage in the early stage of the race and then ended up taking the lead, and then in the latter stages Darren McCormack was flying. Unfortunately, that resulted in some contact in the end and handed over a very well-deserved victory to Valentin Barrier. But it just went to show just how much those tyre differences can affect the dynamic in the race. And with 60 minutes around this circuit, I am sure that is going to be factoring very nicely into tonight's action. We've got a good grid, as always, in the Pro Series. Some fantastically talented drivers are entering tonight's race. A lot of familiar names, also a couple that have missed out a couple of races earlier on in the season, so maybe not outright in the championship battles for overall positions in that top three, where some of the really nice prizes of this championship are all going to be given out to, but certainly very fast names that could cause maybe a little bit of grief for those that are trying to go for those points at the top end of the standings. Server should be open in just a moment, and we will make our way across and see what all of these drivers are getting up to as they dial in their setups for the final few moments. There'll be a short practice session before we head into qualifying, and then, like I say, 60 minutes of racing goodness for us to witness around here at Brands Hatch. So server is up, so I shall make our way into that in just a moment and get everything set up there. And we will also go on for a nice onboard around the circuit and get a really fantastic appreciation for just how quick some of these corners end up coming at you. I don't think it's quite the fastest circuit in the UK for average speed. I think that technically still goes to Thruxton, which is not so where we typically see too much GT action, but amongst the British circuits that we do have here on ACC is definitely going to be up there with the likes of Silverstone, and like I say, it's pretty relentless for these drivers as they try to deal with this very tricky circuit. So I'll finish getting everything sorted out, and then we should be able to make our way across in just a second and just see exactly what this fantastic circuit has to offer. So here we go then for 8.5 minutes of practice for these drivers to get everything finished, ready for that all-important qualifying session. We've got the likes of Robin Schwanken server. We've also got Aidan Walsingham in that very nicely liveried Mercedes for the Visceral Esports team, and keep an eye on the likes of the McLaren, the Mercedes, the Ferrari too. Tinko van der Velde in the server this evening as well, and those cars, particularly the Mercedes, has sometimes struggled to be on point with the outright race, but in the British GT circuits, the BOP does tend to fare a little bit kinder to the likes of Mercedes. I know that car in particular is very strong at Snetterton, for example. Maybe not quite on that same sort of level of pace here around Brands Hatch, but I think it might be more competitive than it sometimes is. So that would be really interesting to see how the likes of some of those drivers in that car wheels that around the circuit. I think the McLaren as well should be pretty handy around here with all these high speed corners. Get the last of our overlays sorted, and we'll head on board with someone in just a moment. And also just want to take a quick moment to say thank you to everybody for all of the incredible support that we had on last week's stream. It was the most concurrently viewed stream that we've ever had on the LFM Pro Series, and just fantastic over these last few months. All of the support that's been shown for this wonderful championship. So thank you everybody so much for that. And also we are rapidly approaching 2,000 subscribers on the channel, which is just incredible. So if you are enjoying what you are watching, we have a slim chance of maybe creeping over that milestone tonight, so do consider also subscribing to the channel. George Boothby about to start his laps. Will go on board with the number 5 Honda, multiple time race winner in this championship standings. On the brakes then, have to be so delicate with that brake pedal to really try to balance the trail braking. Don't go too wide on the exit. The gravel will slow you down dramatically into Druid. Take a bit of a double apex approach through here. It's very similar to Luffield at Silverstone, how you tend to approach that corner. Down into Graham Hill Bend through that apex. I imagine that those poles will be demolished within a short space of time as these drivers look to try to eke out every single millimetre around the circuit. Patient through Surtees, maybe a little bit wide of the apex that the number 5 car would have wanted to be in proximity to that under the bridge then, and on the climb up towards Hawthorns then. Such a rapid corner, get the nose tucked in. You want to be on the power as early as you can be. Third gear for the Honda there. You'll see a few different choices depending on each of the cars, and this is a really tricky sequence of corners, using all of the track and a bit more on the exit through the exit of Dingledale, then blind apex into Sheen Curve. Got to be tricky through there as well, and then into Sterling's. Really get the car nailed into the camber there, and that'll hook you around the apex nicely. Sheen Curve is such a dangerous corner around the circuit. It's so easy for your race to be turned on its head, and then through Clearways, up Clark Curve, on the run up towards the line then for George Boothby. Very quick lap around here, and for the British driver, 23.625 is the current time. Bit wide through Paddock Hill Bend for the number 5 car, but of course this is practice and he has plenty of time to get everything dialed in. Also green track conditions right now around this circuit, so this will rubber in during practice qualifying, but the race could very much have some potential changes in weather conditions, so that could really make for an interesting 60 minutes of action. The likes of the Hondas, the Porsches, which have tended to be the strongest cars overall in this Pro Series grid when we look at each of the circuits we've gone to. Very fast in the dry. Imagine that the Porsche will be very rapid around here once again. The Hondas should be on pretty good pace. They might struggle a little bit for grip in certain corners around here, but of course they have the mighty power advantage, which is really going to help them, particularly on the climb, and that is Sheen's Curve striking already in the practice session for George Boothby, and cause a lot of talent in the cockpit of that car, but even Sheen Curve's proving to be quite the challenge for the multiple-time race winner. But yeah, the Honda is going to have some good opportunities to try to make overtaking happen through the exit of Surtees and on that run up towards Hawthorns. Also from Clark Curve down to Paddock Hill Bend, that's another opportunity as well. But Brands Hatch, these corners come so thick and fast. The likes everywhere from Hawthorns down to Sterling's, very difficult to make an overtake happen through that sequence of corners. So it's going to be tricky, and it's going to be a patience game as well for these drivers. In actual fact, Michael Romagnoli in the Aston Martin going to the top of the time machine, so maybe we'll see that car be a bit more competitive. The Italian driver has done a fantastic job as of late for extracting pace out of this car and really maximising what it is capable of. And when you have to push around this circuit and really have confidence in the car, having a platform underneath you where it just encourages you to extract every millimetre, and it's begging you to really hit every apex, get on the power as early as you can and wring the neck out of the thing. That Aston Martin, that is when that car can really start to show some strong pace. Korekas, I think, is going to put in a pretty tasty lap, and he does by a quarter of a second, goes up to the top of the standings. Granted, Korekas, an amazing driver who has had so many fantastic results in the last couple of seasons, still winless in the Pro Series extraordinarily. He's had multiple pole positions. He's been in the championship fight. He's in the championship fight once more for Season 9. but just hasn't ever quite found himself in a spot where he's been able to take a race win. Maybe that will change today. We'll have to see for the Lithuanian driver. Very, very quick at that. And has absolutely mastered the Porsche. Very competitive in that car, of course. Recently a teammate alongside George Boothby and Luke Whitehead, all new recruitments of the Veloce esports team. And then there is this man on your screen at the moment, Tico van der Velde, the Dutchman, the number 17 Ferrari. Much like Hutchinson, has often been able to extract some really fantastic pace out of that car, and I imagine that is going to be quite the weapon around here. The only places that I think that car is going to potentially suffer is through the likes of Sheen Curve, maybe Sterling's as well, where there's those rapid changes in undulation, and you know, we'll see a lot of cars, unconventional pit entry for that number 17 car, but you know, we'll see a lot of cars really pushing the limits as they try to take a lot of apex through Sheen's Curve to make sure they don't run wide on the exit. But the Ferraris, as we well know, don't tend to react very nicely to the curbs and bumps. So it's going to be tricky to have that sort of level of commitment around those parts of the circuit, comparing to the likes of the Hondas, the BMWs as well, I imagine, will be fairly quick as well. Much like the Aston Martin, very stable and forgiving platform, and really encourages the driver to extract everything out of the car. Really nice shot here of a lot of the liveries that we have in this field, and some very nice ones indeed being sported by multiple drivers. For those that quite often would be longing for the presence of a Bentley, Lexus, Nissan, all of those great cars, I'm afraid, unfortunately, it is going to be another week where we don't have any of those manufacturers. We have got one of our regulars in the server once more, in the form of Jonathan Clifford, where we have a terrible camera angle to try to show that one off. We'll go for that number 29 car in the Lamborghini, a car that we don't see too much representation of. It's a little bit more in use than the likes of the Bentleys and Lexuses, but it's just in recent BOPs, it used to be on pace with the likes of the Audi around somewhere like Kyalami. Fantastic car, they're really great agility, and it has had some improvements made to it. A lot more horsepower in that car than there once was, and that allows it to maybe be competitive at certain circuits in certain conditions, but it's just absolutely terrible at tyre management, and the aero package isn't the greatest on that car either, so that's why we don't tend to see that one being as popular as perhaps some of these other vehicles. Of course, the Porsches, the Hondas have become favourites, as I say, in recent seasons. The Porsche, an absolute weapon under brakes, acceleration through the corners, but still has that straight line speed disadvantage. The Honda, that used to be a car that was just nowhere to be seen in terms of pace. Very tricky car to drive, still is to some extent, but is seemingly more forgiving than it once was. But now has the advantage of having a mighty straight line speed, acceleration, and is very, very agile out on track as well. All of our drivers flying out for their opening lap in this 15-minute qualifying session. Track has started to rubber in somewhat already and is up to fast. Whether it switches to optimum near the end of this session, we shall have to wait and see. But no rain for these drivers to contend with as they head out on track for the first time. It'll be Grantis Carrecas that is looking to get a lap in early. And this long train of cars in this 34-car grid, all winding their way through. It's going to be tricky around here, actually, because like I say, it's a very short lap. And I imagine that these drivers are going to be bunching all the way back to the likes of Sterling's and Sheen Curve, particularly on this first fly, and traffic could also be a little bit of a hazard for some of these drivers as we go through the qualifying session when everyone is trying to find space. And Carrecas, say, wasting no time whatsoever, getting those tyres up to pressure, up to temperature, and those brakes as well. Might take maybe an extra lap around here, considering how short it is to really get those tyres into the optimal window, but The Lithuanian driver will be the first to hit this circuit. Let's go on board with the man in the Porsche, currently P3 in the standings, and is still searching for his first race victory, but has taken many a pole position on occasion, clipping that first curve very nicely. Running into the gravel, though, on the exit. Hasn't invalidated the lap, I don't think, but will have lost just a small amount of momentum on the run towards Druiden on the power as early as he can in that Porsche. This is a very nice sector for this car, flying through Graham Hill's bend then, and then using all of the track that you can get away with on the exit. Bit of a tricky one for track warnings here at Brands Hatch as well. There's a couple of corners where you're really pushing the limits and a bit more. Absolutely going for every ounce of tarmac is the number one car. Of course, Grantis Correcas taking over the highest rated driver on the LFM platform. Long-standing man that had that honour was Marco Bischoff, the two-time Pro Series champion, and Correcas going a little bit deep through Dingledale then, and just about keeping it all together through Sheen Curve. Don't see that apex until you hit it, and it's so easy to then go offline. Committed through Sterling's then on the power once more, heading underneath the bridge towards Clearways. It's been a fairly tidy lap from this number one car. Hear him playing with the throttle and then steering to try to bring that one together on the exit, taking that short line towards start-finish line, and it's a 23.0, immediately displaced though by the number 6 McLaren of Robin Schwanker. And I did say that that car could be pretty competitive today. A lot of high-speed corners, and McLaren loses out a little bit in terms of straight line performance nowadays, but still very much on par with some of the best when it comes to medium and high speed cornering capability. I think Schwanker's taken a little bit too much on the exit of Graham Hill bend there and has invalidated the lap. Luke Whitehead has gone on to the front row and already going purple in the first sector. I think also the Evo edition of the McLaren 720S GT3 car was revealed today. Whether that's something that makes its way into ACC, we'll have to wait and see. I know we have some GT2 cars on the way at some point, and everybody hoping for some of those other Evo editions to make their way into the sim. Correcas, purple on this current lap. Hutchinson in the Ferrari in that top 5 group as well. Half second up is the number 1 car. This should be good enough to displace the German driver who sits out top of the field for now, and he does by 0.3 seconds. Mighty lap time there. His teammate, Luke Whitehead, and Schwanker rounds out the lap. Matthias Kuhn as well. Tinker van der Velde putting in a very good lap in the Ferrari. Luke Whitehead just coming into Clearways now. Only found a 10th on this lap. He went very nicely in the first sector, but seems to have lost out a little bit later on, but still good enough, I think, for P3 as he hits the timing beam. Good enough for the front row, actually, by 0.005 of a second. Displaces the Dutchman of 17 car, pushing very hard there, and he has invalidated the lap in the process, but he was 0.3 of a second up on that, so there is still a lot of time for Tinker van der Velde to find. We've also got the 2 Yassit pairings, or George Boothby, I think, now officially part of Lotto Esports. Of course, close affiliation with Yassit, as the man on screen, Yaroslav Honzig, also known Jardio, the beloved streamer in that wonderful community team livery, back with us this week after being unable to attend around Mount Panorama, because apparently had better things to be doing in Sweden, attending a WRC event, and I think he came away from that having a fantastic experience, although I think maybe a little bit under the weather, unfortunately, for the Czech driver at the moment, but hopefully making speedy recovery, and will be on a fine pace, I'm sure, very quickly. Robin Schwanker, just 25 thousandths of a second adrift, 55 thousandths adrift of Grantis Correcas, but I tell you what, Luke Whitehead on a mighty lap at the moment, 0.4 up is the British driver heading towards the top of the grid. I think this will be to displace his teammate. He does by almost 1/4 of a second. Tinko on an improvement again. He's invalidated the lap once more, and he's had to back out of that one already because he needs to get back out on fresh tyres. George Boothby just completing a lap, goes to P6. I did see Marco Bischoff as well. He's got himself up to P5. Difficult season so far for this number 2 car, the 2-time Pro Series champion back-to-back. And the German driver just has not been able to put together a season he wanted. He's still our winningest driver of Season 9 so far, taking victories at the season opener and then also at Kyalami under a lot of pressure from Luke Whitehead after Darren McCormack made a fatal error in getting a stop-and-go 30-second penalty. But consistency has not been the friend of the German driver this season, so he'll be looking to try to bank in a lot of good results in the latter half of the season if he has any chance of making his way back up to the top of the standings. I think currently sits in P4 in the championship, if I'm not mistaken, on drop scores taken into account, but he's still about 1,000 points behind the likes of Whitehead. So a lot of work needs to be done from the number 2 car. Sasha Vassner on an improvement, down in 13th place at the moment. He has found 2 tenths, also 3 tenths. Oh, that's a big moment for the Greek driver. Gerardis pushing extremely hard and a bit too much, and Sterling's ended up costing him a lot of time. Dust kicked up by someone in front of the number 13 car. Also got Valentin Barry that's found a 10th on his lap. He's coming into clearways now, and on his way to round out lap. The man that won at Watkins Glen hasn't quite been at that pointy end of the grid since then, but a 2/10 improvement for him sees him jump up to P11, as I think quite a few drivers on outlaps at the moment. We've got Ayrton Stefano, the Argentinian, in the number 34 McLaren. He's found a couple of tenths on the opening part of the lap. See if he can carry that all the way to the end. We've got Antonov on a big improvement in the number 22 car. What's this going to be for the Honda driver? P16 for Antonov there. Immediately goes on to another lap. Samuel Fock in the number 4 Ferrari then. I think may have very recently moved his way up to 6,000 ELO. I think he briefly, I'm not sure if he lost that rating, unfortunately, before going into the Pro Series tonight. Yeah, he's 5,999 ELO on my bit of information there. So the Latvian driver will be hoping to get back into that 6,000 mark and reclaim his platinum status for that, or excuse me, is that legendary status for 6,000 ELO? It is, yes, because Jardio snuck into that one as well, so he'll be looking to get that back in due course, and 3 tenths up on his current lap time. That should see him make his way up towards the tail end of the top 10 if he can round out this one. Matthias Kuhn, in the meantime, has split the Veloce Esports pairing, goes up to the front row, and for Samuel Fock in this number 4 Ferrari, what's it going to be for him? P11, just behind Jalier in that number 3 Honda. Now some of our drivers at the pointer end of the grid. Matthias Kuhn already a 10th up on his lap time as he heads towards Hawthorns. Such a tricky corner, and it's one of those corners where for the Porsche, it's not so bad once you get back on the power, but we know how unstable the rear end of that car can be once you come off throttle. And because of the nature of Hawthorns, that you kind of blend from the brake to the throttle with that one more so than you perhaps do with some of these other slow speed corners. And yeah, the Porsche, as he really wrings the neck out of the car on the exit of Sterling's then. Belgian driver in the number 9. Doing a very good job to be on some good pace here, but I think he's lost a little bit of time on the exit of clearways. I think he'll still be an improvement as he hits the time beam. Oh, and less than a 10th away from Luke Whitehead. Great effort there from the number 9 car. Marco Bischoff has made his way up towards the top 3 then, as he continues to try to work further up the order. Luke Whitehead just finishing his lap at the moment. Again, registering that he's going purple on this lap, but it's very fine margins to his previous best. I'm not sure it'll be an improvement when he hits something with just about, as Tinko van der Velde in the Ferrari out of nowhere, purple in the final sector, the Ferrari driver by 5,000ths of a second, displacing Whitehead then, who has already gone back to the pits to get some fresh tyres onto that car. Great effort there from the Dutchman on his return to the series. Robin Schwanker as well on a pretty big lap at the moment. Heard a lot of gravel there. I think that was Rui Nunez that just went off ahead of the number 6 McLaren, as he continues to push on through in towards Shinka, then using absolutely everything. Look how close to the edge of the circuit is. This is why these drivers are in this top division of the Pro Series, because it's all of those extra millimeters that stack up, open up the corner, increase the momentum on the exit, and find you lap time. It's a 10th up for the number 6 car as he heads towards the finish line. It'll be, I think, into the top 5, perhaps top 4 for the number 6 McLaren. Then again, Tinko going very, very quickly. He's gone board with this Ferrari, and I've almost cursed him again. Everyone that I seem to have gone on board with around this part of the circuit, I think that is even Gerardis up ahead, and Tinko abandoning that lap. So apologies to the Dutchman then with that one, but he still has 3 minutes on the clock and will look to make another flying lap. And he'll have to be pretty conscious of whether or not he sees this one through, because if he does, I don't think he'll get another lap in before the end of the session. So I have to see how he fares. Robin Schwanker, I think that is just in front of him through the first corner. Don't think it's affected Tinko too badly. We'll have to see how his lap fares. Aiden Walsingham in that big bad V8 powered Mercedes making his way through in towards Westfields now. Mercedes, good suspension, good electronics in that car. And Tinko has pulled over to the side of the circuit, and into the pit lane he goes. So he will be looking to get a fresh set of tyres on that car and head out for another effort once more. Lovely sound there from that number 14 car as he blasts his way towards Clearways. Has found half a second by the looks of it on this lap, but he has invalidated it somewhere. But that is a mighty bit of pace, and unfortunately for the overlay actually was a bit deceptive there for me, and the half a second was the wrong side of half a second where the British driver would have wanted to have been. But the Mercedes will start another lap now. Who else is out on circuit at the moment? We've got Vassner 2/10 up. Samir, who is just finishing his lap as well. This might see him climb just about in towards P12, I think, for the Latvian, and he does exactly that, and has just about enough time for 2 more laps if he's got the fuel in the car and the tyres will withstand it. There's white flags out for a couple of drivers. I think that is both Tinko, who is just warming up his tyres at the moment, Matthias Kuhn having his last attempt there in that white and pink Porsche. Jordan Tempest abandoning his effort there, so he'll be no higher up than P17. Sasha Vassner 3/10 up on his lap as he looks to try to make his way in towards the top 10 in the Porsche. What's it going to be for the German driver? P12 in the end as he has time beam, but will have time for one more effort. Noah Eder, K Kramer Racing Esports teammate, of course, to the reigning champion, as he looks to try to round out his lap time. And where's he going to sneak up to? Top 5 for the German driver. And checking in, Tinko just about to start his final lap. Luke Whitehead going purple again. It's very close though. This will be his final attempt. You see a lot of drivers in the top 4 there or thereabouts with their previous lap times. So difficult to find margins on such a short lap. And right now it's Robin Schwanker that's really been the only one. For a moment he was up. Matthias Kuhn, that is his effort, backs out of there. Manos Gerardis further down the order I see is 3/10 a second out. The BMW driver trying to see what he can do. And all the way up to P15 for the Greek. Just about gets across, but is going to abandon any further lap there. Luke Whitehead still pushing on. So is Tinko. Very small improvements. Luke Whitehead, how brave is he? And the answer is very. Robin Schwanker brings out yellow flag, so there's no reader. So I think it's going to be no further improvement for them in towards Clearways. For the last time, it's a 10th up for the number 7 car. Luke Whitehead, already a pole sitter in the Pro Series, trying to make it another one to his name. 2/10 up on the exit of car curve. There's a mighty lap time from the number 7 car as he hits towards timing beam. It's pole provisionally for Luke Whitehead, and Tinko is not on an improvement at the moment. He's going to have a mighty couple of corners as he heads towards Clearways. I'm not sure he's going to have enough. He's really going to have to go for it. He's not under pressure really from anybody else, but I don't think the Dutchman's going to be able to find anything to contend with the number 7 car. He hits the timing beam. It is an improvement, but it's only good enough for the front row. A couple of other drivers rounding out their lap times. Rui Nunes, the Portuguese driver, hits the timing beam and it goes up to 21st position. And I think we've got Stefano that is just rounding out his final lap. No improvement for him. Sebastian Krohn has pulled over to the side of the road. And that will be it then for the qualifying session. What a final lap then from Luke Whitehead. That was a monumental effort. Almost into the 21s on that one. Not quite able to make it under that mark, but that was a fantastic bit of driving from Luke Whitehead, who I do also believe that much like, we'll have to double check this, but much like Grantas Correcas, his Vloche Esports teammate. Yes, so our top 3 drivers in the championship at the moment are all winless, which is a bit of an unusual situation, but just goes to show exactly how much the consistency has factored into all of this. But Correcas, Whitehead, George Boothby the only one of those 3 that has taken a win in the Pro Series previously. And will that be the day that it changes for Luke Whitehead? We'll have to wait and see, but what a fantastic effort there from the number 7 car to bring that one to another pole position. And we will have a look through this grid in just a second. And there we go then. So Luke Whitehead is your pole man for Brands Hatch. Home circuit, of course, for the British driver. Tinko van der Velde starts on the front row. Great effort there from the Ferrari driver upon his return to the Pro Series. Robin Schranker said that McLaren might be on a better pace today. And the German doing a fantastic job. Almost came close to a race win at Paul Ricard. Will the tide change for the German driver this time around? We'll have to wait and see. Matthias Gunn, the Belgian, starts in P4. And again, Jade Hutchinson, the Canadian. He's been oh so consistent. He starts once more in the top 5. Qualifying, not always his strong suit, but race pace and racecraft, very much something that he has shown in abundance. Noah Reeder starts P6. George Boothby starts in P7. He would have wanted to have been a little bit further up the order. Marco Bischoff behind his Kenny Kramer Racing Esports teammate starts in P8. Grantas Correcas further away from Luke Whitehead than he would have wanted to have been as well. Both the championship and that inter-team battle will be, I'm sure, rattling around in those drivers' head. Jaroslav Honzik rounds out the top 10. Romagnoli, who briefly went very quickly in practice, finds himself just outside the top 10 in the Aston Martin. Still a great effort there in the dry qualifying session from him. Sasha Vassner in the Porsche starts in P12 with Samuel Fock starting in P13 for the next one of the Ferraris. Valentin Barry, the Frenchman, down in P14. Race winner at Watkins Glen, like I say, hasn't quite been in the same sort of position that he was in the earlier stages of the season. But maybe race pace will be more in his favour. Walsingham starts in P15 with Manos Gerardis, a Greek driver who had a bit of a busy time in qualifying. Starts in P16, just ahead of Krzysztof Makowski for the number 20 car. Kirill Antonov in the 22 Honda starts in P18 with Konstantin Soldatov in that number 8 Aston Martin, starting just inside of the top 20 with Sean Tempest, another one of the BMWs, rounding out those top 20 positions. Then Rui Nunes, a Portuguese driver, in that number 26 car, starts in 21st position, followed by Roloff Radek in the Aston Martin. A few more Astons on the grid this evening, I think, than we have had on previous occasions. But great to see more variety of manufacturers. It gives us some fantastic dynamics between each of the races. Brugnara in the number 23 car starts 23rd, and then Ayrton Stefano, the Argentinian, starting in 24th position for his Pro Series debut. Narzinski in the number 31 car starts in P25. Jan Drexler starts in 26th position with Kevin Rowlands in the number 30 Aston Martin just behind. As his engines all start to fire up, drivers will be underway for the formation lap in just a moment. Sebastian Krohn in the number 32 car starts in 28th position with Siggy Lentus in that very identifiable and nice looking Yeet Esports car. The Swiss driver starts in 29th with Harald Stubenhocker in the final position of the top 30. Janis Taxnis, I believe teammate to Manos Gerardis, in another one of the BMW starts in 31st position, with Eric Conrad in the second and final Yeet Sports car on the grid in 32nd position. Jonathan Clifford, the American, starts in 33rd, and then rounding out the grid, Florian Duakop in the Mercedes, so not having the best qualifying for the German driver who's been a previous race winner in this championship. Having a very dramatic victory at Bathurst last season. Wasn't able to bring quite the same level of pace when we were there last week. But he'll be looking to do something special. And we'll get the final bits and pieces of our overlay together. Mandatory pit stop for these guys in this 60-minute race. No rain on the horizon either, at least for the first half of the race. So that can make things very interesting if there is any late changes, but we have a pretty dead wind. So if there is going to be anything that pops up as a result, I think it will certainly be in those latter stages. And that's that pit window. They have a 20-minute pit window in the central part of this race. And that can sometimes make it tricky when you've got these adapting conditions and you've got to try to get the tyres in the right position at the right time. Having that pit window can sometimes be a little bit of your enemy. And we Luke Whitehead, though, in the Porsche, who took another stellar pole position in qualifying. All these drivers getting themselves into formation now, ready for 60 minutes of action around this Brands Hatch circuit. Who will lead on the run down towards turn 1? I think the Porsche might have the advantage in the opening sector, but then there's that big run all the way up to Hawthorne, so we'll have to see how it all ends up playing out then. But for round 7 here at Brands Hatch, then it'll be Luke Whitehead that will see them lead towards turn 1 for the first time. Can he finally take a victory in the Pro Series? We're about to find out, and they're underway then. It's a great start for the British driver, Robin Schwanker, on the second row of the grid, all the way towards the inside. Tingo van der Velde trying to defend that dream start for Luke Whitehead, who extends advantage onto the gravel, though, very quickly, and now on the run towards Druid's Curve there. Robin Schwanker down the inside of the Dutchman, side by side with many cars in the background as well. Robin Schwanker, I think, has just about got the move done, has he? Tinko trying to keep his nose on the inside towards Graham Hill, almost contact there, and look at Mateus Gunn carrying a huge amount of momentum on the exit there, trying to make it around the outside of Tinko. Almost contact, sending those two around then, and in the end, Mateus Gunn, I think, further contact as they went into there. Tinko then stays in P3. Now it's no Reader having a drag race with Mateus Gunn on the run up to Hawthorns, but dream start then for Luke Whitehead out in front as it's getting very busy further into this section as well as they all head through the top part of the lap. Yellow flag for somebody that's number 26 cars, Rui Nunes, the Portuguese driver, now in towards Westfield and Dingledale. See all of these cars snaking their way up through this part of the lap as they head in towards Sheen Curve for the first time. And I saw, I think, Noah Reader going a little bit wide there on the exit, but they all managed to keep it on the black stuff for the most part. And start to go in towards single file. Marco Bischoff trying to look up the inside of Grantus Carreras, but unable to make anything stick for the time being. Also saw the likes of Valentine Barrier putting some pressure further down the field, but Whitehead leads then ahead of Schwanker, Tinko, and Valentine is trying to make something happen, but is actually in fact having to fend from Antonov on the run towards Paddock Hill Bend for the first time on the first flying lap of this race. Tinko immediately back on the attack of Robin Schwanker for that P2 spot. Second, though, is Luke Whitehead's advantage. He's got to be careful, though, for track limits. Saw him going quite wide there on the exit of Graham Hill Bend. And there is in this big train of cars all the way down from about P6 to P18. Very small margins between each of these drivers. I see a little bit of side-by-side action. Valentine Barry now trying to go on the attack towards Samir Fock, and the Ferrari is going to have to try to fight against the power advantage of the Honda, and there's nothing that the Latvian can do against that one. Saw a couple of other changes for position as well as they all fly up through Hawthorns then, and then weave their way over the top part of this circuit. Very close proximity for all of these guys. Makes it so difficult to judge each of these runs through these corners. Schwanker and Tinko, though, They work together a little bit as Stefano brings out the yellow flag. Oh dear, several cars involved in all of that, and hopefully the McLaren will stay out of any further incidents there, but there's a lot of damage on that car. What on earth has happened there for the McLaren? As a replay, unfortunately, it's not quite caught up to where I would have wanted that to have been, but the Argentinian then having an abundance of damage on that car. There's a big scrap going on right now between Florian Duacop. We've got Eric Conrad, City Lentus all involved in this as well. Multiple cars side by side as they head through Paddock Hill Bend, then Valencia Barrier as well. I think it's just made a position up on Sasha Vassner. Florian Duacop trying to look around the outside. He's in a ET Sports sandwich at the moment. Mercedes driver has to settle for that position for the time being. Whitehead, though, fastest lap of the race last time around, but very close margins between himself and next couple of cars. George Boothby trying to go on the attack. The Porsche around the outside has the power advantage. Does he have the grip? Surely not. On the outside of Hawthorne's, then almost contact with Noah Reader, and onto the grass he goes. Noah Reader still holding that inside line. George Boothby fighting on the run up towards Westfield in the gravel again, and here comes the likes of Hutchinson. Oh, I thought there was going to be contact there. Correca's trying to get involved in this one as well. These two teammates for Veloce Esports, and backs out of here. Marco Bischoff now putting pressure onto the Lithuanian, and Hutchinson again biding his time, sneaking up past the issues of other drivers, and now finds himself in towards P6 and sets his sights off in charge of Noah Reader. But George Boothby, that battling not working out. Contact between himself and Grantas Correcas is now under pressure from Marco Bischoff. He's trying to go all the way around the outside in towards turn one. Jardier trying to get involved in this as well, but I think they'll stay as they were. Cut back though for Marco Bischoff. Can he get out the inside towards Druids? The answer is no, and Hutchinson I think may win a little bit deep under brakes there just in front, but no losses in all of that. Tinko still 4/10 adrift with Robin Schwanker, but it was Robin Schwanker that was fastest lap of the race last time around, and they are already starting to close in on Luke Whitehead, so maybe the battle for the front isn't done just yet. Romagnoli losing a couple of positions there and going wide on the run up towards Surtees, and I think there's been another instance. Sammy Fogg go off on the grass on the inside line there, and there's going to plummet down the order. Jonathan Clifford I think losing several positions as well with another incident further down the field, but there's only so much we can keep up with. Solotov down the inside of Antonov on the run in towards Hawthorne's then. Honda versus Aston Martin. Gerard is trying to get involved in this now as well. Can he make his way past a Honda? Not quite. Antonov does leave some room there, but it wasn't quite the BMW size gap. Flashing the lights there, maybe not too happy with the space he was left with. Very difficult section of the circuit to try to follow in all of that. And flying now in towards Sterling's corner. I'm afraid I can't show the first lap. I can only go back as far as 30 seconds on the replay, so once it's happened, and with as much action as we're having on the circuit, unfortunately I can only see a few incidents at a time. McCoskey into the pits then, so I'm not sure. Surely that I can only imagine that's a drive-through penalty, because he I don't think has had any damage on that car. But that is not what the Polish driver would have wanted whatsoever, and it does look to be a drive-through penalty, so track limit striking extremely early in all of that. Also, I have to try to keep an eye on these stewards' inquiries as well. That may end up, and it was a drive-through penalty for causing a collision, so that's where that has come from. Also a 15-second penalty for the number 22 car, that is for Antonov, and they're the only two penalties being handed out so far, so McCoskey must have caused quite the incident further down the order. Unfortunately, we couldn't catch it in the end, but that's losing several positions in the process. Walsingham has dropped down the order a lot as well. Number 14 car all the way down in 29th position, so not where he would have wanted to have been. Looking at the front of the pack though, look at this. Whitehead then leads ahead of Schwanker and Tinko van der Velde, but your top three gradually over time getting more and more bunched together, and right now it's Robin Schwank in particular that is showing some very mighty pace. Another very quick time there, 22.5 for him, and taking a 10th out of the man that leads this race. So the battle could very much be on, and look at this, McLaren deep under brakes on the run up towards Druids. Got to be careful of Tinko behind, but it will hold on for that position for the time being. Sam is still trying to put some pressure onto Brugnara, but can't do anything about the Italian driver just in front. Of course, equal cars between the two Ferraris sometimes make it very tricky to find an advantage somewhere around the circuit to make something happen. Hutchinson only a couple of tenths behind the struggling Noarida, who had a great qualifying session. Friday, though, doesn't have the same power advantage. Yellow flag for the number 34 car. They have retired to the pit lane. That is Stefano, who has obviously had a bit of a difficult race so far already. Hutchinson, just look how much that car was upset over the curb there. But Hutchinson continuing to put some pressure onto Noarida for this battle for P5. And Noarida going wide on the exit of Sheen curve there. Brought out the white flag as well for a moment as well, so he's had to go very cautiously in towards Sterling's, and that has allowed Hutchinson again immediately to close up for the Canadian driver. Might have an opportunity on the next run towards Hawthorne's Robin Schwanker. Again, just a couple of hundredths faster than Luke Whitehead. The time's already starting to drop off a little bit, so I think these tyres may be already starting to show effects of wear. That's why the undercut is so powerful. Samir Fogg and Brugnara battling further down the order once again, but it's the Italian driver who still holds on to that position. Sebastian Krohn and Kevin Rowlands as well having a scrap. And now the drag race towards Hawthorne's kicks off once again. Tinko dropping back a little bit on the last lap. And Roman Schwanker, the closest he has been in a long time. What's the straight line speed advantage? It's pretty good for the McLarens. He needs to get closer, but that could be a very handy advantage to have. What about Hutchinson as he looks to once again go to the outside, up on the run towards Hawthorne's? Carries a momentum in the Ferrari, got good pace in this high-speed stuff, is a Canadian, but Noarida really being the cork in the bottle. It's allowing George Boothby, Korekis, Bischoff all to catch up. Jardier not too far behind as well, but what was once a pretty decent gap between 6th and 7th place now becomes a 5-car battle. Noarida good in qualifying, but maybe struggling a little bit in terms of outright race pace. Bischoff showing his nose to Korekos as they go into clearways, but unable to find anything. Hutchinson, a mighty run on the way towards turn 1 there, but wasn't able to quite carry it on the exit, and he thinks about the inside, but he can't quite make anything stick just yet as he fares through his next couple of turns. So, well, Robin Schwanker's made a mistake, I think, through Paddock Hill Bend, because he's got Tinko for company, and the Dutchman trying to find a way through on the McLaren. But they stay as they were in the top 3 for now. It allows Luke Whitehead to get a bit of breathing space. Noarida wide on the exit of Graham Hill Bend. Jardier just showing himself in the mirrors of Marco Bischoff. Those two had an absolutely titanic fight for Season 7. And then Jardier was a little bit out of the picture for Season 8 when it came to battling for the championship. Has got a race win under his belt once more for this season. A little bit of graphical confusion with the Ferrari as Tinko heads through that part of the circuit once more. These two drivers, they need to work together if they can, because it does seem like they've got better pace. There were Jade Hutchinson, fastest lap of the race, and 23.5 on that last lap was definitely losing time relative to what he is capable of. 22.4 is the pace that that man has in the number 10 Ferrari. Noarida desperately trying to keep him behind, but there's the Ferrari and there's the pace. But it's got towards the outside. He goes, but towards the outside of Paddock Hill Bend. That's a very tricky move to make stick. He'll try to switch back towards that inside line, and I think has to back out of the throttle. George Boothby trying to get involved in this as well, but he can only head towards that outside line. No room for the British driver to get involved, and he's got to be wary of Korekis, Ryan's gearbox. Of course, those two drivers battling very closely in the championship, but Luke Whitehead leading this race still at the moment, second over Robin Schwanker. Grantas Korekis close to the back of George Boothby, almost pushing him along on the run in towards Surtees then. And I don't think he's going to have the horsepower to be able to do anything about the Honda on the run up the hill. He's got pretty good straight line speed, more than I would have expected, maybe running a little bit lower wing. Jardier trying to make something happen on the German in front of him. Maybe goes for the cutback, carrying good speed there. Bischoff wise to it though, defends in towards the middle of the circuit and stopping the number 3 car from being able to make anything stick. And it's so tricky to find opportunity as Radix goes very deep on the run up towards Hawthorne's there. Excuse me, that's Westfield. And I think losing the position to Samuel now finds his way up in towards P18. Jade Hutchinson again, almost pushing Noarida on the run up towards clearways.
how much of a straight line speed advantage has he got towards Paddock Hill Bend? He needs to get to that inside line if he can. Looks towards the outside. He's got a championship to think about because it has been fantastically consistent, and Noah Reader losing momentum, and that's the mistake that's going to open up the door for the Canadian. Surely makes it stick this time around. A little bit of door banging through Druids then, but he does get through, and now it's George Boothby on the attack immediately, and Noah Reader, I think, is going to be in a little bit of a world of pain because that Honda, mighty quick in a straight line, is going to be putting all sorts of pressure onto the German as into Surtees they go. A little bit of a defensive line for Ida then. George Boothby would have wanted to have been on the power a bit earlier, I think. And you heard that car really skip and drop in the revs as they went over that bump. And in actual fact, Marco Bischoff is the one that may be in position to do something on the run up towards Hawthorne's end. But number 2 car having to still stay behind. Correct, it's putting all sorts of pressure onto his teammates. But Hutchinson already checking out 7/10 of a gap to Noah Reader. And the Canadian finds his way up into P5. And now sets off to try to attack Matthias Kuhn, who is a few seconds ahead. And really the top 4, a massive gap to the rest of the field. That's how much time some of these guys have been losing through this battling. Karekas, Bischoff, Jarnier, all extremely close together. George Boothby not having the best lap last time around and hasn't been able to close up to the back of Noah Reader in the way that I might have anticipated. Because these Porsches are really giving him quite a headache at the moment. Also, Samir Fock, Raditz and Sean Tempest in a 3-way tussle for P17. Samir showing his nose towards the inside line. Tempest very respectful and maybe going a bit defensive when he didn't need to. Samir trying to make a move up towards Druids, and he gets down the inside line. I think he's going to have that one done on the exit, and he does. Duradis and Antonov also battling on the run up towards Graham Hill Bend. BMW switching back towards that left-hand side on the exit as he got the car up the inside into Surtees. I think he might have done side by side with the Honda, and I think the outside line isn't going to end up working out for the number 22 car in the end. So Duradis gets his way up into 15th position, and I think the Honda are a little bit too far away to come back at him anytime soon. Meanwhile, Hutchinson now really has gapped Noah Reader on that last lap. 1.2 seconds now, his advantage over the German driver, and then it's Boothby, Karekas, Bischoff in this very densely packed field at the tail end of the top 10, all battling with one another. A lot of Porsches here though, and it's difficult in the Porsches, we well know, to make a move stick. And Robin Schwanker suddenly has found himself 4/10 behind Luke Whitehead. So the top 3 have suddenly closed up. It was Schwanker and Van der Velde who were lapping in the 22.5s on that last lap. 22.8 for Whitehead. So not a massive difference, but enough to really give Whitehead a bit of a headache on this next run, potentially up towards Hawthorne's, because this is practically the closest that the number 6 car has been, as they head through Surtees, and McLaren looks very stable through there. And what is the advantage for the British outfit on the run up towards Hawthorne's, gaining in the slipstream all the time? Can he get to the inside line? I think he's a bit too far away, surely, and he does have to back out of that move. But Whitehead now coming under immense amounts of pressure, running onto the grass, and Whitehead having to really wrestle that Porsche for everything it is worth. Tinko now just within a couple of tenths as well in this battle. He'll be hoping that these two come together and he can just sneak on through as a little bit of a tank slapper for Schwanker on the exit of Sheen Curve there, but he is still absolutely right there. Van der Velde as well, almost pushing his driver along. Karekas, George Boothby, Bischoff with a wiggle as they went through Sheen Curve there, as they all tried to make moves. Karekas so wide on the exit, and that is going to drop him out of any opportunities. Last laps around for each of these drivers, losing several tenths from their previous pace. It's amazing how quickly they lose pace as soon as they start to battle. Tinko a little bit wide on the exit of Paddock Hill Bend, but I think just about still within track limits. Robin Schwanker, though, mighty in the first sector. The Porsche starts to extend its advantage from the top of the hill towards the end of the lap. But this is, I think, the area of the circuit where Schwanker's got his best opportunity to try to go for a move for the race lead. He's got the straight line speed advantage. He's very quick in the opening section as well. We'll go on board the rear diffuser once more of Whitehead, and again Schwanker. This is by far the closest he's been, and Luke Whitehead now feels the need to go defensive. McLaren on the attack for the first time, trying to go around the outside, but can't make that one stick. Could he go for the switchback? He's got the momentum, has to back out the throttle. Luke Whitehead going defensive on the run up towards Westfield. Now almost contact between the pair of them through there, and Tinko staying right in the midst of all of this as well. But it's just watching all of this unfold in front of him. When you've got two cars battling in front, it is almost impossible to find opportunities sometimes. Gaps do not come about all too often. It's a very tight and narrow part of the circuit as well, and so tricky to follow through here, but only a few tenths separating your current race leaders. And you compare the lap times to the likes of Hutchinson, who's already taken a second out of Matthias Kuhn. So the Ferrari of Hutchinson still motoring along very nicely, and 40 minutes left on the clock in this race. Pit window will be opening up fairly soon, and we may start to see some of these undercut strategies coming into play, but it does look like, as the tyres are wearing, Antonov battling with Gerardis, the Honda down the inside of the Greek driver, and I think that's going to be an easy move in the end through Paddock Hill Bend, unless Gerardis can get a mighty exit, but I think it's too far away to do anything about that. Schwanker versus Luke Whitehead versus Tinko van der Velde in this battle in the top three. Fantastic stuff here in the Pro Series once more. Schwanker, I think, maybe a little bit too far away. Whitehead thinking about having to go defensive. No, Reader has lost some positions there. I think our race leaders will stay as they were, so I'm going to gamble and see if I can have a look at what's happened there for Noah Reader. And Matthias Kuhn has brought out the white flag as well. I don't know if he has had an incident. Oh dear, there are several things going on, and I'm now locked in a replay. I'll try to catch on board with all of this in just a moment. Marco Bischoff has lost a couple of positions. Vanity Barrier finds way into the top 10. No Reader clipping the grass there on the run up towards Surtees. Now allowed Boothby, Korekis to get through, and I think in all of the bunching that we've had in that then Marco Bischoff, who was right behind his teammate, do they go side by side towards Hawthorne? Surely not. I think it's going to be too tricky for me to gather all that, and there's action still taking place, but whatever ended up happening, Bischoff finds a way towards P11. Jardier looks left, looks right, and back towards the left-hand side again, trying to make his way past Noah Reader, who's got very deep under brakes, and it's a big off there for Noah Reader on the run up into Paddock Hill Bend, and he loses that position. Marco Bischoff losing the position to Sasha Vassner, so, and I think there might be damage on that car as well, and he's now got Romagnoli in the Aston Martin for company, who's trying to make his way through, and I think Marco Bischoff, his season goes from bad to worse, trying to stay on the inside towards Great Big Bend, contact between the pair of them, and the number 2 car almost around. Might as well have had a full spin there for the effect it's going to have, and that is disaster for Bischoff. I have to look back towards our race leaders though, as they are all absolutely nose to tail at the moment. Antonov also putting some pressure onto Romagnoli. Pit window has opened. It is all kicking off here at the moment. I don't think Antonov can do anything about the car in front of him. What about Valentin Barrier versus Noah Reader, who really seems to be struggling? A lot of the Porsches really seem to have lost some pace in this latter phase of the race. Valentin can't do anything. What about Gerardis versus Antonov? Same story for the BMW driver. Almost impossible to keep up with all of the action, and surely some of these drivers will have to consider going for that undercut, but with the sort of level of tyre wear that these cars are showing for the likes of the Porsches, maybe the Hondas as well, you do not want to be doing double the distance in the latter phase of this race. Tell you what, someone is managing their tyres beautifully. Jade Hutchinson, 22.7, almost on par with his fastest lap of the race last time around. That Ferrari doing a beautiful job of nursing those tyres. Luke Whitehead, poor exit out of Graham Hill Bend. Schwanker almost launching attack down towards the inside. Always managed to put Whitehead off though on the run through Surtees, as Brugnara further down the order has come into the pits. Schwanker launching an attack I don't think Whitehead was expecting. He won't be able to get to the inside line on the run up towards Hawthorne because his exit was compromised. But the Porsches do seem to really be struggling. Tinko maybe a bit bottleneck with this Ferrari as well. The gap between Matthias Kuhn and Jade Hutchinson though now 1.7 seconds of a Canadian absolutely flying, and the Ferrari is maybe the car that you want to be in. Schwanker almost having a big error on the exit of Sheen curve there, just about gathers it up. Whitehead is able to breathe for I imagine about half a lap because these cars behind him do seem to be a little bit quicker. Marco Bischoff has lost another position. He must have had some heavy damage on his car, surely, for that to end up losing so many positions in the process. He's now down in 17th place. Meanwhile, penalty situations for certain cars. Number 29 car has got a 10-second time penalty. That is for Jonathan Clifford, as Stubenhocker and McCoskey going side by side. McCoskey obviously recovering after his very early drive-through penalty, as Valentin Barrier, Romagnoli, Samir Fock and Marco Bischoff all come into the pits. I think that makes sense for Bischoff's race. It won't be the best in terms of managing his tyres, but I think there's some heavy damage that he is having to try to carry on that car at the moment. Also, the likes of Walsingham has come into the pits as well. I think he's running a bit wounded. Tinko has dropped back already from Schwanker. This McLaren has looked mighty consistent and quick. We've got a little bit of traffic just up in front. Whether or not that will cause them any complications, we have to wait and see. Schwanker sustaining the pressure on Whitehead for this battle for the lead, and there's also a 15-second penalty for the number 22 car. That is Antonov that has got a penalty, so that he is right in the mid-pack, so that is definitely going to affect his position in this race. So Whitehead still leading ahead of Schwanker, ahead of Tinko van der Velde, and it's Tinko that's going to blink first. He may be able to make this strategy work, because we've seen that based on at least Hutchinson, who is running around in much cleaner air, that Ferrari is holding on to its tyres. Now, it may suffer a bit if they really push that stint out in this second half of the race, but the Ferrari might be the one car that doesn't quite get so badly affected by that longer second phase. So that could be a very interesting strategy that the Dutchman is playing. That could really help him undercut the McLaren and Porsche that are ahead of him. Sebastian Krohn trying to put some pressure onto the Porsche of Nartazinski in front of him. But the Porsche having enough straight line speed on the run up towards Paddock Hill Bend. Wide though through turn one. The Honda dipping a wheel in the gravel though, so won't be able to make anything happen just yet. Meanwhile, we have Siggy Lentus, two BMWs fighting between Sakness and Lentus then. Swiss driver not able to get up the inside of the BMW in front. Hutchinson now within just a couple of tenths of a second away from Matthias Kuhn. It's been a mighty end phase of this first half of the race from the Canadian. And this is what he has been so good at doing, and it's a mistake from Matthias Kuhn as he continues to lose time to the Ferrari, and there's a bit of traffic in the form of Walsingham that they will be coming across in just a moment, and both Whitehead and Schwanker. Oh, and that was contact with the wall for Robin Schwanker. Oh dear, and he is sped into the pit lane. And you could tell in the language of that car on the entry, so he slammed on the brakes. He is desperately hoping not to get a stop-and-go 30-second penalty, but he's made contact with the wall as well, so at the very minimum, he's going to either lose time in the pit stop or carry damage in the second half of the race, and that is disastrous. Surely that will allow Tinko to come out in front, and the question is, how quickly is Tinko going on this lap? He has to be absolutely rapid with this undercut, and Whitehead will be praying that they have done enough and that they have reacted quick enough to the Ferrari driver. Sigilenta still putting pressure onto Sakness, but unable to do anything about it. And now this is the crucial point. Whereabouts is Luke Whitehead? He is on his way. There's a Ferrari in the background, and Whitehead, I think, is just about going to come out in front of the Ferrari of Van der Velde then, in actual fact, by a bit of a margin. So Luke Whitehead still holding on to the lead. What about Schwanker, though? Whereabouts is he in all of this? He's come out behind Matthias Kuhn and may even come out behind Hutchinson as well, who's going for this overcut strategy. Probably won't want to stay out there on those tyres for too long. And there we go. He is going to box on this lap. Noah Eder, see what he decides to do. As Grantis Korekas also coming into the pits. George Boothby is a driver that is deciding to stay out, and so does Noah Eder. So we're seeing undercuts and overcuts being played by a few of these different drivers then. No rain by the looks of it on the way out of the latter stages of the race, and a big oversteer moment for Noah Eder. That is not going to help him in terms of trying to make this strategy work. Luke Whitehead already coming under some pressure from Van der Velde, who is going very quickly. Of course, tyres up to pressure and temperature for the Dutchman. It'll take a bit more time for Whitehead. And Hutchinson is now underway in his pursuit to try to make his way maybe even onto the podium, because Roman Schwanker, I can't see on my overlay whether or not he has got a stop-go 30-second penalty. If there's anyone that could let me know, that would be incredible. But Luke Whitehead then has managed to bring Tinko with him. And what about Jade Hutchinson? And he has emerged in P3, so he's made the overcut strategy work on Matthias Kuhn there. And that Ferrari that was showing immense amounts of pace in the latter phase of the first part of the race is looking in a fine position to maybe be on target then for another podium, as he continues to put in good, consistent results. And that's what he's been so good at doing so far this season. Karekas also now in hot pursuit of the German driver in front, who may even be carrying some damage. We're not entirely sure. Tinko within a couple of tenths of Whitehead already. And that Porsche that has shown good speed in qualifying, but just across the board, so many of these cars have really struggled with tyre wear in the latter stages of the stint. They've got a longer stint to go through in this second half of the race, so it's not going to be an easy time whatsoever for your effective race leader, as Walsingham and Sebastian Krohn, I think, have just had a bit of side-by-side action. And Walsingham there, I'm not sure if there was a little bit of a nudge. There was certainly flashing of the lights, and not Sebastian Krohn would have seen it on the exit of Sterling's there. Mikoski coming into the pits, of course. He is due to make another pit stop, because even though he did do one earlier on, it wasn't in that mandatory pit stop window. So he's going to drop down the order. We'll have a look at the net position changes on the grid shortly once we've had everybody complete their pit stop. Matthias Kuhn up to speed pretty quickly on those tyres, but I think he's going to struggle to get past the Ferrari. And Hutchinson, as long as he's got those tyres in the right kind of window, and the same window that he had them in for the first half of the race, I think is going to be very difficult to pass, and will likely set off in hot pursuit of our two drivers at the front of the field. 7 seconds though, the gap between Tinko and Hutchinson. But if these two do start to battle, and I get the impression that that very much is a possibility, then that may allow the Canadian driver to close the gap. But what a great performance once again. Roman Schwanker has some traffic, and I think he must have had a so he got a drive-through penalty. So Robin Schwanker had a drive-through penalty. He's about to overtake Brugnara on the run-up to Hawthorne's end. Traditionally, as Walsingham makes his way past Narzazinski and Bischoff, several drivers making moves. We've got a yellow flag out for Valentin Barrier. What has happened there? And the Frenchman has gone off, and he's always lost it over the apex of Sheen Curve there. A big tank slapper and into the wall for the man that won at round 3. And that is going to be very impactful on Valentin's race later on. But a drive-through penalty for Schwanker, that must be for corner cutting, because a stop-and-go 30-second penalty is your typical penalty. I do believe speeding in the pit lane. I'm not sure if there's any difference for severity, as Valentin has brought out the yellow flag again. Is that a retirement to the pits? It is! So the number 11 car, by the looks of it, won't be finishing this race, so disaster for Valentin, who didn't have the best qualifying, had made his way up towards the top 10, but that mistake costing him dearly. But I'm not sure if that drive-through is for a speeding penalty or not. But like I say, I do believe that the general way in which these things work, we've got a BMW three-way scrap, the two YT sports cars battling with Janis Taxnis, and here's Eric Conrad trying to go at the inside of Sigi Lentis, who is now on the outside. Excuse me, Eric Conrad on the outside. Druis and Lentis very wide on the run towards Graham Hill. Ben then Tinko van der Velde is still 4 tenths adrift of Luke Whitehead, and apparently that was for speeding in the pits. So then I do seem to remember mentions of a system in the game where, depending on the severity of the speeding, that maybe the penalty sometimes changes between whether it's a stop-go 30 or if it is a drive-through. So Schwanker then slowing down somewhat as Karekas comes trying to go around the outside of George Boothby, who's just emerged from the pit lane. He'll hold on to position for now. And the two Veloce Esports teammates battling very hard on the run-up towards Druid, because these two fighting in the championship. And Schwanker then, after going from again, a position where he could have maybe taken his first victory in the Pro Series. Now finds his way on a recovery drive as Marco Bischoff makes his way past Nardazinski and up into 21st position. But that is going to be very interesting. George Boothby in all of this. His overcut strategy will help him defend this position, of course, from Carreras, because he has got the fresher tyres. But I think at least for the next couple of laps, that Porsche behind him is going to be incredibly menacing. But it's so difficult to make a move stick on the Honda. Giant Hutchinson hasn't been able to close in on to the likes of Van der Velde and Luke Whitehead, lapping very similarly. In actual fact, last time around, Luke Whitehead able to match the fastest lap of the race from Giant Hutchinson. And what was it this time around? Very close margins, in fact, between Whitehead and Van der Velde. Almost nothing to choose between them. And Van der Velde not putting, as George Boothby has seemingly made a mistake. And Carreras has got up the inside on the run up towards turn one. Almost contact between the teammates there. And a little bit of contact to get on the entry. And that's going to send George Boothby wide. And here comes Jardier trying to make a move on all this as well. A very heavy defence there from the British driver. And Jardier will be sent towards that outside line. Can he do anything for the comeback on the exit of Druids? I'm not sure he's going to be able to, and now have to follow single file at least through Graham Hill Bend. Didn't quite catch how that all started between those two, but George Boothby losing the position as the number 22 car has brought out yellow flag. That is Antonov, who seems to have had an off again through Sheen Curve. That's another Honda that has had an incident through Sheen Curve. He has managed to get going again. I think has avoided any contact with the wall. So not suffering quite the same level of fate as Valentine did, but certainly not what the 22 car would have wanted. And Jaroslav Honzig and George Boothby battling very hard. A lot of these Yassi/Veloce drivers really leaving absolutely nothing on the table. They're certainly scrapping as if it was any other driver, which gives us a brilliant amount of action. Walsingham up the inside of Sean Tempest. Sean Tempest onto the grass. And Marco Bischoff goes through. So does Nardazinski. And now it's Bischoff trying to put some pressure on to the Mercedes in front. You would have to think inherently the pace in that Porsche is going to be stronger than the Mercedes in front of him. But the question is more about opportunity. Van der Velde has made, I think, a little bit of an error further up the grid and has dropped back to 7/10 behind Luke Whitehead. Still only one driver left to do their pit stop. That's Kevin Rowlands. And there is about 5 minutes left on the pit window. And we will then have a check. Florian Duacop, and again, someone else on Sheen Curve. I said that this was one of the trickiest corners on the circuit, and just oversteer on the entry. And the number 19 car doing almost mirror image pirouette of Antonov's spin there. Gets going again, doesn't lose any positions in the process, but another difficult day for the German driver, unfortunately. As we've got Mikoski still putting pressure onto Saxis in that TF Racing BMW just in front of him. Mikoski getting a drive-through penalty very early on in this race for track limit, for a collision, and up the inside he tried to launch a very late move on the BMW, and Janis is keeping him behind for the time being. Whether or not he's got the momentum up the hill as Kevin Rowlands does finally come into the pits then. Mikoski almost into the rear diffuser of the BMW in front, but unable to make a move stick as of yet. Once Rowlands emerges from the pit lane, we'll have a bit of a check of all of these drivers' net changes of position. Walsingham has managed to get a little bit further away from Marco Bischoff and the Porsche, and the reigning two-time champion and long-standing previously the number one driver on the LFM platform, continuing to have a torrid season despite being the winningest driver that we have had in Season 9, taking 2 victories. It has not been any sort of series of performances he would have wanted. Contact on the side-by-side run up towards turn 1 between Mikoski and Saxis, and then trying to go for the cutback towards turn 2 there. Beautifully done. It might be the first switchback we've seen successfully done from the Polish driver. Then the number 20 car up the inside, and the number 33 is unable to respond there, and Krzysztof Mikoski does make the move stick in the end. Beautifully set up. Tinko has already managed to close back up to Luke Whitehead. These two not being closed in on particularly by Hutchinson. 7.2 seconds the gap now between himself and Van der Velde, but Tinko crucially about 0.2 of a second faster than the number 7 car in front of him, but that Porsche still holding on to that position for the time being. Sachs is trying to respond, but unable to do so, and I think that as they head on to the next lap, surely Mikoski will be able to extend his advantage, in actual fact doing it by about a car length or so already. Marco Bischoff still trying to put pressure onto Walsingham in that Mercedes in front of him. But that Mercedes, it's not the best car, it's not the fastest in a straight line, but it's got a lot of torque and a lot of grunt, and particularly on the run up towards the hill to Hawthorne's, one of the most practical overtaking opportunities around this circuit as Bischoff goes wide on the exit of turn 1 there. This is where he's quick, you see, immediately closing up, and for a second, so Tassis has lost a chunk of time to the BMW in front, and now is coming under pressure from one of the Yeet Esports cars of Eric Conrad on the run in towards Druids now. Number 24 car trying to find their way through. Won't be able to do anything for the time being, but yeah, very slow lap last time around. Must have made a mistake. Oh dear, that's a big moment for the green driver on the run towards Graham Hill Bend, and I think that's going to allow Siggy Lentus on the run up there as well to make the move, and he has made that stick. You can see him on that recovery bouncing his way across the grass then, and we're going to see that BMW flash his way past and says thank you very much for the freebie. Meanwhile, Marco Bischoff all over the rear diffuser once more of Walsingham in that Visceral Esports Mercedes, clipping the grass on the exit of Sheen Curve and going deep on the run towards Sterling's. Almost contact between the pair of them there. Bischoff just about keeping out of the rear bumper, trying to look towards the inside on the run towards Clearways, but can't get the move done. And still Walsingham holding on to that position. Same goes for Whitehead versus Van der Velde. Our top 3 drivers lapping very similarly. Matthias Kuhn actually a good lap. Luke Whitehead, both of them actually running wide on the exit of Hawthorne's. They won't want to do that too often. The Porsche probably a bit more settled under those conditions than that Ferrari. It doesn't take a lot to upset that car, and I'm sure that Tinko won't avoid doing that all too often. Wide on the exit, Sheen Curve as well. We've also got a 5-second penalty for number 19 car. I think that is Florian Duerkop, and it is. Krzysztof Mikoski has come into the pits again. So I can only imagine that that's for another drive-through penalty, but that one, I think, would be for track limits as opposed to one handed out by the stewards. Of course, we have live stewards, and that is Antonov that you just saw flash up in front of your screen there. We'll see if we can catch what happened to the 22 car, and has just brought it to a stop on the outside of 22. And confirmation then, thank you, from one of the mods, so that was a drive-through penalty for track limits for Mikoski then, so his day going from bad to worse. We've also got a 10-second penalty for the number 14 car, and that is in the hands of Walsingham. So while Marco Bischoff may be in a bit of a difficult spot at the moment, he will at least get that position from the Mercedes if he stays close enough. And it does seem like he'll be able to manage that, at least for the time being, because he does still have a significant pace advantage. 23s for the first time in a while from your 2 leaders. Again, Tinko absolutely pushing above and beyond and trying to extract everything in hot pursuit of Whitehead for this battle in the lead of this race. George Boothby has also recovered some time up to the back of his Veloce Esports teammate of Grantis Korekis. Crucial points between these two as well in the championship. But George Boothby, the British driver, unable to make anything happen just yet. But if he does get close enough, we know how good the straight line speed advantage is of Honda versus Porsche. And I'm sure that Hawthorne's will present another opportunity at some point later on in this race. We won't have any rain here at Brands Hatch, but when you've got close action like this all the way through the 60-minute race, I think that would just almost be a little bit too much for some of these guys to try to manage and deal with, but because they have put on an absolutely fantastic show for us as always. Tinko, a lot more commitment under brakes there, but then go a little bit wider on the exit. See what is the advantage for the Ferrari on the run up the hill. Whitehead does have at least some level of straight line speed advantage. Samir has got very close all of a sudden to the Aston Martin of Soldatov in front of him. And maybe tricky to make a move. The Aston Martin does tend to have good top end. A little bit slow accelerating out of corners, but does tend to be pretty good for straight line speed. But exits like that won't be helping him. Walsingham still managing to hold off Marco Bischoff as they head in towards Surtees now as well. Practically pushing along the Mercedes in front, but just unable to make anything happen. And that Mercedes, it just has enough horsepower and enough torque in the engine that's under the bonnet of that car. Bischoff so much faster in the corners though, trying to commit as much as he dares, and it's so difficult to follow through this part of the lap and not end up making a mistake. You see, blind completely on the run into there. It's so difficult to judge the exit of the track, and this is where we saw him be quick earlier on. The Mercedes clearly struggling for pace in that part of the circuit. Bischoff, does he think about move towards the inside? Shows the nose for a split second there, but darts back in towards the outside line and has to stay behind Walsingham for the time being. Tingo van der Velde continuing to sustain pressure on Luke Whitehead, who did a 23.1 last time around, 22.9 for Tinko. And Hutchinson, he's not making massive inroads, but he has started to extend his advantage over Matthias Kuhn and has got the gap under 7 seconds now. So the Canadian driver again putting in very good performance, and also just having a look at the changes of positions. Big movers. Soldatov in P11 gaining 8 spots. Karekas also gaining 4 positions as well. So very important in terms of his championship, and of course right now just in front of one of his closest rivals in the standings, George Boothby, a position ahead of him. Eric Conrad as well, Sebastian Krohn, Brugnara, Radix, all big movers in this field. As Bischoff, I think, is almost within touching distance of the car in front as I try to scrabble to navigate to where he is on circuit. Still unable to do anything about the Mercedes. Goes wide again through Sheen Curve, and it's that going wide, but he doesn't quite get himself on the line he wants, and that was an oversteer moment. Marco Bischoff pushing as hard as he possibly can. So is George Boothby putting pressure onto his teammate as Drexler and Sebastian Krohn swap in position. Sebastian Krohn, I said he was one of our biggest movers, just seemingly lifting off there and handing the position to Drexler. Someone else that's trying to make a move is Robin Schwanker, who has dived down the inside of Manos Gerardis there, and Gerardis, does he let that one go? It just seemed like he just went very deep under brakes there, and the McLaren says thank you very much and takes position. Sebastian Krohn is bringing out the white flag again for a moment. Doesn't look like, maybe made a mistake on the exit of turn 1 and dipped a wheel in the gravel, because he has lost a lot of ground over Drexler in front, but doesn't seem to be anything too cataclysmic for the Honda driver. Bischoff again trying to make something happen on the run up towards Hawthorns, but it's so tricky, and the Mercedes having enough of an advantage once more to hold on to that. Come on board the rear diffuser of this Porsche, who has had an absolute faithful of that Ferrari. Tinko, quite a horrible feeling for a moment there that Tinko had a disconnect, but just taking a much wider line. The agility in the Porsche is so impressive, and Luke Whitehead maximising everything he possibly can in these slow speed corners, because it's in this latter part of the track where the Ferrari does seem to have an advantage. Also a little bit of a power advantage in that number 17 car as well. And Whitehead again, you hear him say, it just sounded like he's a little bit cautious on getting back on the power. There's again another curious with graphical stuff for the Ferrari behind, but seemingly all is well. Bischoff, a tenth of a second. Oh, and he's launched an attack up the inside of Walsingham towards Druids. He's managed to get alongside for the first time in a while. Number 14 car still has that inside line, though, as they get to Graham Hill's Benz and Marco Bischoff on to the grass there. And will have to stay in 18 spots. Narzinski hoping that he can capitalise on something in all of this as well. Bischoff again sets up so much of a better exit out of Surtees, but just doesn't have the horsepower to make anything stick. Up at the front of the field, wide for Luke Whitehead through Paddock Hill Bend then. And with 30 minutes left to go, are those tyres starting to see familiar wearing territory as what we saw in the first half of this race? Hutchinson bringing down the gap again, almost half a second faster than these two. Gap almost under 6 seconds now. He still has some work to do if he wants to get involved in this fight for P1. But if Tinko does manage to get side by side with Luke Whitehead and they begin to scrap, that could really bring in the Canadian driver into all of this. That's George Boothby, 0.3 a second behind his Voce Esports teammate. How does the Honda fare on the run up the hill? Good line for Karekas out of Surtees there, but the Honda, look how much pace it has on this run towards Hawthorns, but I don't think he's going to be close enough to launch an attack. And then through all of the corners coming up, I think the Porsche will have the advantage over the British driver behind. A little bit unsettled over the curb there. Made a bit of a unwanted jump for the Lithuanian, but still crucially ahead of one of the drivers he is in close contention with for the championship. George Boothby running wide on the exit of Sterling's there. And on the run towards Clearways, get a lovely flash of the flame out of the exhaust, powered by that incredible sounding flat six in this car. And the Honda of George Boothby, even with those fresher tyres, still unable to make anything happen. Again, Hutchinson, a couple of tenths up over Tinko van der Velde. In actual fact, it was a fairly good lap from Whitehead last time around, who was able to extend his advantage to half a second, which with the proximity that these two have been in for most of this race. And of course, when Robin Schwanker was involved in this battle as well, we had a three-way tussle between these two. Half a second seems like quite the gap between these two. White flag for Soldatov, maybe dipping a wheel in the gravel on the exit of turn 1. Bringing Samir and Robin Schwanker into play as well, and Schwanker on the charge as well, 6 tenths faster than the cars in front of him. So that McLaren will be looking to make moves pretty quickly, I think, and maybe carrying enough speed to even make something happen up towards Surtees there on the brakes towards that corner. I think that's going to be an easy move there for the McLaren. In the meantime, Marco Bischoff has also managed to make his way past Walsingham, who goes very deep on the run towards Druids, and in the end, after all of that scrapping and all of that side-by-side action between the German and the British driver, it was an easy move in the end for that number 2 car, and he will look to just set off and charge on to the likes of Brugnara. He has 10 minutes to try to close a 5-second gap. Yellow flag for Noah Reeder. So what's happened to the K. Kramer Racing Esports car? He's got enough of an advantage over Sasha Vassar, and again, it's Sheen Curve. Big tank slapper over the crest, and a big impact with the wall there as well, and that is going to be very difficult for him to bring that car home. And Sasha Vassar, 5 seconds behind. I have to see how severe the damage is. Lost 4 seconds there, so he was lucky not to be sent around in that follow-up impact with the wall there. But Noah Reeder, as both K. Kramer Racing Esports cars having a difficult day on the Pro Series grid. Tinko again putting pressure on to Luke Whitehead, but unable to make anything happen. Closest he has been, though, for a while in this part of the lap, and really trying to make something stick for the Dutchman. But Luke Whitehead, that was a big jump for the Ferrari on the exit of Sheen Curve. We've seen that car have issues elsewhere on the circuit as well, so sensitive to the bumps. And again, a wide moment on the exit of Sterling, and that just gives Whitehead again that extra car length that he needs to just feel a bit calmer, as Robin Schwanker brings out the white flag for a moment and goes for a big comeback though onto Soldatov to try to get his way up into P11, and he does, but he goes wide, and Soldatov back on the inside there, and Samuel Folt maybe in a position to try to capitalise as well, but he's too far adrift, so the McLaren will have to wait for another occasion then as they head in towards Sterling. But I don't think it'll be long, because Schwanker, as we well know, has got pace in that car, using quite a chunk of curb and a bit more on the exit of Sterling there, much like Van der Velde, who has immediately managed to close up again to our race leader. We'll go on board with Schwanker on the run up towards turn 1, and he is gaining in the slipstream. Soldatov not defending this one, and doesn't manage to get alongside though on the run into the brakes, so he will have to wait potentially for another attack towards Hawthorns, I would imagine, because we saw how calm that car seemed to be. Oh dear, full strike I was going to say, on the exit of Surtees, certainly not those through Druids. He's going to get completely caught up in the middle of that turn there. I'm not sure if he went down another gear or if he just bottomed out on that inside curb. You can really put yourself in a tricky situation as Soldatov went very wide there. Flashing the lights is Robin Schwanker. I'm not sure if there was something that happened between those two previously that we didn't quite catch on camera, but Soldatov will hold on for now. Romagnoli closing into Vassner, which is good news for Noah Reader because that helps him try to keep his 8th place position. If these two start to scrap, that Aston Martin looking very planted as they jumped over that inside line of Sheen Curve. No such issues for the number 15 car. Van der Velde, 7 tenths now, the gap between himself and Luke Whitehead with just over 7 minutes left on the clock. No Reader comes into the pits. No Reader comes into the pits, so I can only imagine that is a drive-through penalty for the German driver, and that is a disaster. He's carrying that damage still onto his car, but the man that was running around inside the top 10, and it is a drive-through, so that is very unfortunate with such a small amount of time left to go in this race as well. He will be kicking himself for those errors in the latter phase of this race. Schwanker still having to sit behind Solstov at the moment. Van der Velde back to half a second. Jade Hutchinson hovering at 6 seconds the gap, but can't seem to make any further inroads than that. Romagnoli putting pressure onto Sasha Vassner. How does the Aston Martin fare as they climb up towards Hawthorne's then? It's good, but it's not quite good enough. The acceleration for the Porsche now is a cautious line. 4th gear for the Aston Martin through that part of the circuit. We saw 3rd gear for the likes of the Hondas. It's a wide moment for Romagnoli as well, so that's going to put pay to any challenge for the time being. Still your battle for the race lead that's been going on since the very beginning. There was a McLaren in there as well, but Tinko and Luke Whitehead have been involved in this tussle at the front end of the grid for the first an entire 54 minutes, and that is Luke Whitehead flashing the lights onto Makoski ahead to have him get out of the way, because he does not need any additional headaches. To believe both of these drivers trying to go for their first race victory in the Pro Series. It's going to be a little bit awkward for Tinko on the run towards Hawthorne's, and he did have a bit of a wiggle on the run there, and he maybe even goes wide, and he does, and the Ferrari, that is not ideal, manages to gather it all up, but that again just gives a couple of tenths or so to Luke Whitehead, and there is time running out. Meanwhile, Narzinski and Sean Tempest very close together on circuit as well. Sean Tempest maybe carrying good momentum. Narzinski having to go defensive. The BMW sent towards that outside line. Number 16 trying to cut back there, but I don't think he'll have the acceleration out the corner. But maybe on the run up towards Hawthorne's, he will have enough of a top speed advantage over the Porsche that sits just in front of him. George Boothby hasn't been able to make a move onto Korekas, hovering around half a second, the gap between those two. Schwanker still stuck behind Soldatov, but maybe running wounded with that McLaren. I'm not sure if he would have repaired any of that damage. I imagine he may have skipped it. But how much he will be fuming inside the cockpit of that car. So much of a big opportunity today to at least come away with another podium, but those mistakes all coming together and costing him dearly. Solstov doing a good job in what is now P10 after Noah Reader's drive-through penalty, but Robin Schwanker again looking very aggressive towards the inside line, but he's too far away to make anything happen. In actual fact, gets a kick of oversteer again on throttle. That McLaren looking a little bit unstable, maybe starting to go through its tyres a bit too severely, and Narzinski, I think, has made a mistake and allowed the BMW of Sean Tempest through, and on the run in towards Clearways, big slide there for Narzinski on the grass, and Sean Tempest says thank you very much and goes up into 19th place then. Not in too close a proximity of any other car, so I'm not sure if he will be able to make any other positions later in this race. Radix and Gerardis scrapping as well for 13th place. Gerardis under pressure from the Aston Martin, but the BMWs, as we know, have been pretty good in a straight line as of late, and not allowing Radix to get alongside. Hesitation now on the throttle as Bischoff has caught up to the back of his K Kramer Racing Esports teammate, who goes very wide, and I'm sure this won't be too hard a battle between the pair of them, leaving plenty of room. Is the number 12 car, Marco Bischoff, up towards the inside, in towards Sheen Curve there. It's not going to be a very nice way to make the move happen, but I think Marco Bischoff will get the move done and makes his way in towards P16. No Reader, of course, carrying that damage and drive-through penalty as well. And in the end, Marco Bischoff at least managing to take the team honours of being the lead car, at least with 3 minutes to go. Schwanker again now putting pressure onto Solstov in this battle for the final spots in the top 10. Samir slicing around the back of the McLaren All Vadro. Good momentum carried on the exit though from the number 6 car as they head in towards Graham Hill Bend. Solstov giving him room. And Schwanker now, has he been able to compromise this series of lines enough to get a good run up towards Hawthorns? He's trying to time the power. You can hear that he's got the grip in the McLaren, and this is the closest he has been in a long, long time. The slipstream and the power advantage, I think, is in the favour of the McLaren, but it's coming a little bit too late for the McLaren versus the Aston Martin, and it will have to be a car back as they head towards Westfield. Again, he gets a snap of oversteer and can't make anything stick. Sammy immediately on the attack in this train of cars as well, as the cameras decide to take a little bit of time to catch up at opportunities running out for changes of position. It's a wide line there for Schwank as they head in towards Sheen Curve once more, as that was Samir, excuse me, that was Schwanker, that goes very deep in towards Sterling's and loses a position in the process, and he may have dropped too far back now to try to recover that, and will be very quickly due to go on to the final lap of this race. It's been non-stop battling and action, and there's been some pairings of drivers that seem to have just not been able to escape from one another during this entire 60-minute race. George Boothby has closed up a little bit onto Korekis, but again, I think he's too far adrift to make anything happen on his Vloche Esports teammate. Tinko still staring at the back of Luke Whitehead's Porsche. And again, a mistake from Tinko as he's pushing so hard wide through in towards Sterling's, and this will be the final lap of the race when they next cross the finish line. So opportunities running out for the Dutchman, a little bit of traffic up ahead, but Luke Whitehead just has to manage this gap one more time, and this would be very important for his chances at taking the Pro Series Championship. Tinko wide in turn one. That is not going to help the Ferrari in his efforts to try to put pressure onto the man that has been practically unflappable all day. To stellar qualifying pole position. George Boothby, closest he has been in a while to the other Vloche Porsche on the track, and trying to see if he can make anything happen. It's the closest he has been in a long time. Whether or not he can make anything stick is another matter. Easier said than done around this circuit. That is the BMW number 33 car getting out of the way, and one of the major opportunities for Van der Velde not there because he was too far back. Whitehead just half a lap to go to bring this one home. Korekis versus George Boothby on the run up towards Hawthorns as well. And the Honda do anything about the Porsche again. He's got the advantage, but it's just not enough. And we'll have to look through his final sequence of corners. It is very close between Luke Whitehead and Tinko, but Tinko goes wide once more through Sterling's. Just one corner left for Luke Whitehead. It's been a long time coming in the Pro Series Championship, and it took until the second half of the season to do it. But Luke Whitehead is going to be a winner here in the Pro Series. He managed to keep all of those behind him and takes it by the smallest of margins, but the number 7 car will extend his championship lead very healthily. Tinko has to settle P2. Another great race from Hutchinson sees a good podium as Walsingham and No Reader side by side between those two. Walsingham has got up the inside on the run towards Hawthorns there. No Reader wounded, trying to fight back and almost contact. I think there was a nudge between himself and the Mercedes in front, but was not able to make a move. George Boothby also had to stay behind Korekis in the end. Kick of dirt, I think that's from Marco Bischoff up ahead. Romagnoli not able to get past Vassner in the end. What about Schwanker versus Samir Fock? And it will finish as Soldatov, Fock, and Schwanker for the battle for 10th place in the end. And a very unhappy man in the number 6 cars, you can understandably imagine. Radix was also unable to get past the BMW of Gerardis in the end. Drexler versus Narzinski. It's going to be Narzinski that comes out on top. And I think that we just have a few cars left to cross the line. But what an incredible showing in this race. So much battling and so much action throughout the entirety of that race. And Luke Whitehead, he had to work extremely hard for that one. But in the end, was able to do enough to take his first victory of the season. And crucially, with the likes of his 2 championship rivals, Korekis and Boothby, finishing in 5th and 6th place, that is going to be a very healthy bonus in terms of the championship. So, very nicely done from the British driver. We'll have a look at the race results in just a moment when they come through. And of course, if we do have anyone that wants to join for an interview, or anyone in the chat that wants to poke some of their favourite drivers for an interview, then do feel free to. It'd be lovely to hear from any of these guys, especially Luke Whitehead. I know sometimes quite the talker. It would be great to have him in the interview room after taking his first victory of the season. But what a titanic effort there from your championship leader, officially now in the top division. And that was a masterful race that he put together under pressure constantly from the Ferrari and the McLaren in that first half of the race, where those cars just, they seem to manage their tyres just that little bit better. But it was track position crucially, and he had to do a little bit of a tricky part in that pit stop phase as well, because he needed to come out in front of Van der Velde, because if Van der Velde with that undercut strategy had managed to make that one work, I think that Luke Whitehead would have had an even trickier day at trying to recover that P1 position. But he absolutely played it to perfection. Just still waiting a moment for the official race results to come through. But what an absolutely fantastic evening of action that we have once again had. Also, don't think we're quite going to hit 2,000 subscribers at the end of this stream. But thank you to all of those that have subbed to the channel during the stream. And we do have Luke Whitehead that has popped into the interview room. So we will speak to your race winner from today. We'll bring him in to the casting room. So, Luke, can you hear us okay?
Hello, John. I can hear you now.
It's a fantastic victory from you. Your first race win. It's been a long time coming, I think, in the Pro Series, because you have been up there at the tippy top of this field all the way since the beginning of this championship. But finally, today was a day you put on a stellar performance in qualifying, and then really showed a masterful victory in that one as well, defending from Schwanker, Tinko for the entire race. And so you must be over the moon with that one.
Yeah, I'm super happy, honestly. I knew it was going to be a tough slog, obviously, with how hot the temps were. I knew the Porsche was going to struggle, and, you know, if you look at the other Porsches, we were a long way ahead of those guys, even in quali. So, yeah, I knew the car would struggle, and obviously the Ferrari of Tinko is always going to be quick, and also the McLaren of Schwanker. They were both really quick and giving me a really hard time. But, yeah, I'm even more happy that I think my 2 main championship rivals, I think, were George and Grantus, and they finished 5th and 6th, I think, which is also a really good thing for myself. So there's a lot of positives to take, and for sure I surpassed my expectations of what I could achieve in that one.
Yeah, it was an absolutely masterfully controlled race from you. And yeah, Grantis Korekis and George Boothby not having the sort of race that maybe they would have wanted. They would have wanted to be a little bit closer to you, I think, by the end of that. So certainly in terms of the championship, that is a big advantage in your favour. And also going into next week, heading to another one of the British GT circuits, we'll be going to Donington Park, which is another lovely, lovely track. And how are you feeling, do you think, for that one? Do you think it's going to be another tricky one to keep behind some of the likes of the Ferraris and McLarens? Maybe it would be quick there again. How do you feel that one might go?
To be fair, I feel pretty good about Donington, I think, at least comparatively to most of the rest of the calendar. I know Spa's gonna be a tough one, and also so is Indianapolis. So I'm not looking too much forward to those ones, but I think Donington is well, I think it's pretty good for the Porsche. So we'll see what happens. I mean, again, you never know when you get there. I was thinking the Ferrari would struggle here today, and it was the quickest car. So you never really know what you're gonna get. So I've got my I've got my hopes up, but obviously we'll take anything that comes our way, I think.
Yeah, without a shadow of doubt. It can often be a little bit on the unpredictable side with how it's all going to play out. But yeah, without a shadow of doubt, despite the Ferrari and the McLaren seeming like the stronger cars overall today, you put it all together when it counted. You maintained track position even against that undercut strategy from Tinko and did everything that you needed to do to control that victory and bring it home. So huge congratulations to you. And also with those drop scores later on applying at the end of this championship, maybe the likes of Spa and Indianapolis that may not be the ones you'll be looking forward to in this season, maybe that'll dampen the sort of potential loss of scores that you might have on that relative to some of the other cars. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. Still several races, of course, to the end of the championship, but at this point in the season, looking fantastic for you. So amazing stuff today. And also, thank you very much for joining in the interview room as well. It's quite an uncommon occurrence. So huge congratulations to you, Luke.
I'm always up for joining. Always, John. Always.
We'll look forward to hopefully having you in the comms box again. And yeah, best of luck next week at Donington Park as well to you, Luke. And congratulations for today.
Thank you very much. Have a good one, mate. Take care of yourself.
And you. Ta-da.
Ta-da.
Well, fantastic to have our race winner and championship leader now by an even healthier margin joining us for an interview. Big thanks to Luke there, and also to anyone maybe in the chat that gave him a bit of encouragement as well to join us. So what a fantastic race from him. And it has been as... that was not quite what I wanted to do. Apologies for that, everybody. I wanted to keep the final race standings up in all of that. So Luke Whitehead taking a victory in this race with Van der Velde and Hutchinson rounding out the podium. The two Ferraris making their way up to the top of the pointy order of the standings in that, and a great drive from Hutchinson once more, keeping himself just subtly in the background potentially of that championship fight. And of course he has got a drop score of a disconnect to his name, so maybe not entirely representative of exactly where he is in this main championship fight. Matthias Kuhn and Karekas rounding out the top 5, who defended from his Vlocce Esports teammate of Boothby, who finished in 6th place. Jardier in the end, I think a little bit of a lonely race for him, finishing in P7 with Vassner holding off Romagnoli to keep on to P8, and then Soltov rounding out the top 10 after a lot of pressure between Samir Fock and Robin Schrank at the closing stages of the race. Gerardis also won, having to defend from the Aston Martin of Radix behind, finishes P13 with Radix 14th, Brugnara, Bischoff, Walsingham, Noah Eder, Tempest, Narzinski rounding out top 20, and both of those K. Kramer Racing esports cars having a very tricky day indeed. And I think realistically there's going to have to be a lot of misfortune, I think, for some of those other cars at the pointy end of the standings for the likes of Marco Bischoff to make it a 3rd Pro Series title on the bounce. But of course he will be pushing as always, and we know how much talent he has behind the wheel of that Porsche. Drexler, Krohn, Rolands, Conrad, Lentus, Saxis, McCoskey, Stubenhocker and Clifford rounds out your race finishers, with Florian Duakop, Antonov, Barria, Stefano and Rui Nunez being your DNFs from today. So unfortunate stuff for some of those guys. Brands Hatch, an incredibly tricky circuit to master, relentless in terms of how much it keeps you on your toes through all of that. And in the end, it was Luke Whitehead that came out on top, both in qualifying and in the race, and that could prove to be very important in the championship. As I say, we'll be heading to Donington Park for next week's round, a very exciting circuit, which I imagine will also be providing us with some fantastic action, so keep a close eye out for that as well. And if you have enjoyed what you have been viewing this evening, then do consider subscribing to the channel. Like I say, I think we're now about 20 subs away from 2
22,000, which is just incredible. We started this journey back in August, and it has just been amazing support from then on. So thank you, everybody, so much for all of that. And also, if you want to get involved in some of this racing yourself, then do also consider heading over to the lowfuelmotorsport.com website, getting yourself signed up, getting yourself a license, and you can work your way through the ranks and system and join some of these drivers on this incredibly talented Pro Series grid lineup, where there are some amazing prizes up for grabs for the top 3 finishers. And if that's maybe not quite your thing, there's the daily races, of course. There's some prizes for some of those championships. And if ACC GT3 isn't quite what is for you, then also there is R Factor 2 on the LFM platform as well, with a good mixture of sports cars, single seaters, GT4, all to choose from as well. So a lot to take your fancy with there. And if you just want to be a part of an amazing growing community full of people that love sim racing and everything motorsport related as much as you do, then do also consider joining the Discord server as well. And I think we are now up to almost 80,000 members on the LFM platform, which is just absolutely incredible. So it'd be amazing to see as many of you there next week as possible when we head to Donington Park. It'll be same time, same place for round number 8 of the Pro Series. And I imagine it's going to be just as much fireworks as ever. But thank you everybody so much for watching this evening. But until next time then, it's goodbye.